When I wake up, the other side of the bed is cold. My fingers stretch out, seeking Prim's warmth, but only finding the rough canvas over the mattress. She must have had bad dreams. And climbed in with my mother. Of course she did. This is the day of the reaping. I prop myself up on one elbow. There's enough room in the bedroom to see them. My little sister Prim curled up on her side, cocooned in my mother's body, her cheeks pressed together, in sleep. My mother looks younger, still worn but not so beaten down. Prim's face is as fresh as a raindrop, as lovely as the primrose for which she was named. My mother was very beautiful once, too, or so they tell me. Sitting at Prim's knees, guarding her, is the world's ugliest cat. Mashed-in nose, half of one ear missing, eyes the color of rotten squash. Prim named him Buttercup, insisting that his muddy yellow coat matched the bright flower. He hates me, or at least distrusts me. Even though it was years ago, I think he still remembers how I tried to drown him in a bucket when Prim brought him home. Scrawny kitten, belly swollen with worms, crawling with fleas. The last thing I needed was another mouth to feed. But Prim begged so hard, cried even, I had to let him stay. It turned out okay. My mother got rid of the vermin, and he's a born mouser. Even catches the occasional rat. Sometimes, when I clean a kill, I feed Buttercup the entrails. He has stopped hissing at me. Entrails, no hissing. This is the closest we'll ever come to love. I swing my legs off the bed and slide into my hunting boots. Supple leather that has molded into my feet. I pull on trousers, a shirt, tuck my long, dark braided hair into a cap, and grab my forage bag. On the table, under a wooden bowl to protect it from the hungry rats and cats alike, sits a perfect little goat cheese wrapped in basil leaves, Prim's gift to me on reaping day. I put the cheese carefully in my pocket as I slip outside. Our part of District 12, nicknamed Obscene, is usually crawling with coal miners heading out to the morning shift at this hour. Men and women with hunched shoulders, swollen knuckles, many who have long since stopped trying to scrub the coal dust off their broken nails. The lines of their sunken faces. But today, the black cinder streets are empty. Shutters on the squat gray houses are closed. The reaping isn't until 2. May as well sleep in if you can. Our house is almost at the edge of the seam. I only have to pass a few gates to reach the scruffy field called the meadow. Separating the meadow from the woods, in fact, enclosing all of District 12, is a high chain-linked fence topped with barbed wire loops. In theory, it's supposed to be electrified 24 hours a day as a deterrent to the predators that live in the woods. Packs of wild dogs, lone cougars, bears that used to threaten our streets. But since we're lucky to get 2 or 3 hours of electricity in the evenings, it's usually safe to touch. Even so, I always take a moment to carefully listen for the hum that means the fence is live. Right now, it's silent as a stone. Concealed by a clump of bushes, I flatten out on my belly and slide under a 2-foot stretch that's been loose for years. There are several other weak spots in the fence, but this one is so close to home, I almost always enter the woods here. As soon as I am in the trees, I retrieve a bow and sheath of arrows from a hollow log. Electrified or not, this fence has been successful at keeping the flesh eaters out of District 12. Inside the woods, they roam freely, and there are added concerns like venomous snakes, rabid animals, and no real paths to follow. But there's also food if you know how to find it. My father knew, and he taught me some before he was blown to bits in a mine explosion. There was nothing to even bury. I was 11 then. 5 years later, I still wake up screaming for him to run. Even though trespassing in the woods is illegal and poaching carries the severest of all penalties, most people would risk it if they had weapons. But most are not bold enough to venture out with just a knife. My bow is a rarity, crafted by my father along with a few others that I keep well hidden in the woods, carefully wrapped in waterproof covers. My father could have made good money selling them, but if the officials found out, he would have been publicly executed for inciting a rebellion. Most of the peacekeepers keep a blind eye to the few of us who hunt because they're as hungry for flesh meat as anybody else. In fact, they're among our best customers. but the idea that someone might be arming the seam would never be allowed. In the fall, a few brave souls sneak into the woods to harvest apples, but always in the sight of the meadow, close enough to run back to safety of District 12 if trouble arises. District 12, where you can starve to death in safety, I mutter. Then I glance over my shoulder. Even here, in the middle of nowhere, you worry someone might overhear you. When I was younger, I scared my mother to death. The things I would blurt out about District 12, about the people who rule our country, Panem, from the far-off city called the capital. Eventually, I understood this would only lead us to more trouble, so I learned to hold my tongue and to turn my features into an indifferent mask so that no one could ever read my thoughts. Do my work quietly in school. Make only polite small talk in the public market. Discuss little more than trades in the hob, which is the black market where I make most of my money. Even at home, where I am less pleasant, I avoid discussing tricky topics like the reaping or food shortages or the Hunger Games. Prim might begin to repeat my words, and there where would we be? In the woods waits the only person whom I can be myself, Gale. I can feel the muscles in my face relaxing, my pace quickening as I climb up the hill to our place, a rock ledge overlooking a valley. The thicket of berry bushes protects it from unwanted eyes. The sight of him waiting there brings on a smile. Gale says I never smile except in the woods. Hey, Catnip, says Gale. My real name is Katniss, but when I first told him, I had barely whispered it, so he thought I said catnip. Then this crazy lynx started following me around in the woods, looking for handouts. It became his official nickname for me. I finally had to kill the lynx because he scared off game. I almost regretted it because he wasn't bad company, but I got a decent price for his pelt. Look what I shot. Gale holds up a loaf of bread with an arrow stuck in it, and I laugh. It's real bakery bread, not the flat, dense loaves we make from our grain rations. I take it in my hands, pull out the arrow, and hold the puncture in the crust to my nose, inhaling the fragrance that makes my mouth flood with saliva. Fine bread like this is for special occasions. Still warm, I say. He must have been at the bakery at the crack of dawn to trade for it. What did it cost you? Just a squirrel. Think the old man was feeling sentimental this morning, says Gale. Even wished me luck. Well, we all feel a little closer today, don't we? I say, not even bothering to roll my eyes. Prim left us a cheese. I pulled it out. His expression brightens at the treat. Thank you, Prim. We'll have a real feast. Suddenly, he falls into a capital accent as he mimics Elfie Trinket, the mechanically upbeat woman who arrives once a year to read the names at the reaping. I almost forgot. Happy Hunger Games. He plucks a few blackberries from the bushes around us. And may the odds. He tosses the berry in a high arc towards me. I catch it in my mouth and break the delicate skin with my teeth. The sweet tartness explodes across my tongue. Be ever in your favor. I finish with equal verve. We had to joke about it because the alternative is to be scared out of your wits. Besides, the capital accent is so affecting, almost anything sounds funny in it. I watch as Gale pulls out his knife and slices the bread. He could be my brother. Straight black hair, olive skin, we even have the same gray eyes, but we're not related, at least not closely. Most of the families who work in the mines resemble one another this way. That's why my mother and Prim, with their light hair and blue eyes, always look out of place. They are. My mother's parents were a part of the small merchant class that caters to officials, peacekeepers, and the occasional seam customer. They ran an apothecary shop in the nicer part of District 12. Since almost no one can afford doctors, apothecaries are our healers. My father got to know my mother because on his hunts he would sometimes collect medical herbs and sell them to her to be brewed into remedies. She must have really loved him to leave her home for the scene. I try to remember that when all I can see is the woman who sat by, blank and unreachable, while her children turned to skin and bones. I try to forgive her for my father's sake, but to be honest, I'm not the forgiving type. Gail spreads the bread slices with soft goat cheese, carefully placing a basil leaf on each while I strip the bushes of their berries. We settle back into the nook in the rocks. From this place we are invisible, but have a clear view of the valley, which is teeming with summer life, greens to gather, roots to dig, fish iridescent in the sunlight. The day is glorious with a blue sky and soft breeze. The food's wonderful, with the cheese seeping into our warm bread and the berries bursting in our mouths. Everything would be perfect if this really was a holiday. If all the day off meant was roaming the mountains with Gail, hunting for tonight's supper. But instead, we have to be standing in the square at 2 o'clock waiting for the names to be called out. We could do it, Gail says quietly. What? I ask. Leave the district, run off, live in the woods. You and I. We could make it, says Gail. I don't know how to respond. The idea is so prosperous. If we didn't have so many kids, he adds quickly. They're not our kids, of course, but they might as well be. Gail's 2 little brothers and sister. Prim, you may as well thrown in our mothers too, because how would they live without us?